guys, Dan from Mastering Mixing, back to share another video with you guys. And today, per your request, I want to go over mid-side processing and how it can improve your mix. So a quick note about mid-side processing is that it can ruin your mix if you do too much of it. So generally, I like to stick with side processing because you can kind of get away with more of this. If you're doing a lot of mid cuts, then if someone's listening to your mix on a phone or in a club, then a lot of the sounds that you really like are probably not going to come through as well. So I'm going to jump into the mix here and work on this spacey piano. Now with this kind of piano, I'm going to want something that's pretty wide and not taking up any junk in the middle of my mix, because that's really where I want the vocal to shine as well as the kick. So I want to spread all this stuff to the side. So here's the original sample. And that's a great sound. The guy who produced this is a beast. Now, what we can do with mid-side processing is just sweeten this up a little bit. Mid-side processing is not the kind of thing that you want to take a stock sound and all of a sudden you mid-side process it and it's amazing. That's the quickest way to ruin your mix. I've done it. I've seen my friends do it. I don't want to see you do it. So that's enough warning about mid-side EQ. I want to go and show you guys how to use this thing. I'm using the fabfilter Pro Q2. You can use any EQ that has a mid-side option. So I'm going to click on mid-side option down here and notice that I'm only using sides on this because on a sound like this, I don't want to mess around too much with the mids. If I cut all the mids, when it gets played back on a phone, it's going to sound weird. I've done it before. You don't want to go down that road. So what can we do with mid-side processing is sweeten the stereo image a little bit. The easiest way to do this is to work with the sides. So on this sound, I've cut about 680, 5 decibels on the sides because on this kind of sound, I get a pretty good amount of low frequency buildup. And by cutting that, you're going to just kind of carve out that space in the middle of the mix. And the same can be said for this cut down here at 196. That's just going to clean up some of those low ends of your mix. That's mud. You don't really want any mud in your mix. The next thing I've done is done a nice broad Q boost at 3500. This is just to push that sound more to the sides. Like I said, mid-side is about sweetening the stereo image. A lot of this is going to happen up here in this 3500 range. This Fletcher-Munson curve between 2 to 5K is where you can really push that. That being said, I boosted some of the frequencies that will make this sound harsh. To compensate for that, I just did a high cut on the sides. You could do a de-esser, you could do multiband, you could do all kinds of things, but since we're working with mid-side, I just want to show you how to compensate for anything you're doing mid-side. So here's that sound without any mid-side processing. And here it is with a little bit of mid-side processing. Okay, so the sound becomes a little wider, a little less muddy. It's very much like natural EQ, except we're only affecting the sides. So we just have to remember that we're working on wideness and clearness in the mids. Okay, so that's one way that you can use mid-side on something like a piano or a guitar or an instrument. Let's go over mid-side on drums. So here's a kick sample that we can really make better with a little bit of mid-side processing. Now the fastest way to improve this sound is to roll off some of those highs that are taking up the side. Because if you think about it, you really want your kick to be in the center of the mix. If we go back to that little diagram I put up earlier, you'll notice that the kick does not really expand to the sides. We don't want that. We can have some of those higher frequencies as long as they take up the middle. So I've just rolled off some of the sides and you'll notice immediately that the kick is a little more compact. It sounds more in your face. It sounds tighter. That's exactly what we want to achieve using mid-side. Here it is before. And here it is after. So not a huge change because we're really just cutting off some sides. It's not really changing the kick that much. Now if we do want to change the kick, what we can do is do a little mid boost. I'll show you how to do that right now. So all I'm going to do is set my EQ to mid mode instead of side mode. And for this, the fundamental frequency on this kick is 100. Usually it's 100 or 60. So I picked the one that I like. And all I'm doing is boosting it 3.5 dB. And all of a sudden, that kick is coming through the middle of the mix and hitting listeners in the forehead instead of being buried back a little bit. Here it is with just a side cut, and here it is with the boost in the mids. So there you have it, another tool for mid-side that you can have in your back pocket when you have this kind of sound that you really want to be up front and center in the mix. Now you know how to fix that. So the last thing I want to go over is how you can use mid-side to master a track. So sometimes you get a wave. You don't have every single stem of every instrument. So what do you do to make that sound good? Usually you do an EQ cut or an EQ boost. That's exactly what we're doing here. We're just also doing it mid-side. So it gives us a little bit more control over the stereo image. So let's take a look at a beat that I have, and we're gonna affect it a little bit with mid-side. So that already sounds great. The guy who produced this is a beast. I don't really have to do that much to it. But what I can do is make this a little bit brighter. So the snare is a little bit dampened for my taste. So one of the easiest ways to do that is just do a tiny little boost in the mids. You know, I'm just doing a nudge of 0.75 dB in just the mids. I'm not going crazy here. Now I've complemented that with a cut in the mids at about 792, and I went a little bit harder on this. I did 1.75 dB, and what that is doing is just clearing a little bit of the nasality and boxiness in the mix, and it's going to let those sides shine brighter. Another thing that I always like to do on a mastering kind of preset on mid-side, I usually don't have very many rules of thumb and things you should always do, but one thing that I always find making my mix sound better is just having the side cut down here at about 100 hertz, and it'll get rid of any junk. You know, if you're playing it on like surround sound, that's really not doing anything. You want that to be all bass, and the bass is usually going to be heavy in the mids. So you can always play around with this. You know, maybe you keep it at 60, but a lot of this you don't want down on the sides. And the same can be said with this high cut I've done. 1900 is pretty much inaudible to us. If you were to do an EQ reference, which I will go over in a future video, if you were to do an EQ reference on, you know, say a Drake track, you'll notice that it kind of stops at 1600, or excuse me, 16,000 hertz, or, you know, 18,000 hertz, depends on the track, because a lot of that is inaudible to us, so just kind of noise, and by removing that, we can actually make the track a little bit brighter. So there you have it, a very gentle but effective mastering preset or mastering technique you can use for mid-side. And let's just take a listen to the beat before mid-side and after. So here it is before. And here it is after. There you have it. So now you have a decent understanding of how to use mid-side and how you can help your mix. Couple of things to remember: if you're doing a bunch of mid cuts or side cuts, check it in mono. Checking it in mono is going to ensure that you don't completely take away an instrument by doing mid or side cuts. Also understand that I presented this information to you in a very conservative way. Now, rules are always meant to be broken. You could jack up 10 dB at 100 hertz on the kick if you wanted to. At the end of the day, it's all about your preference. On this kind of track, I know the producer very well and he does a great job, so I don't have to go crazy with it. That being said, you might have a track where it's just really muddy down in the lows and you need to do a 3, 4, 5 dB cut in a mid. And that's something that ideally you could adjust in a mix, but sometimes we don't have the stems. So at the end of the day, it's all about experimenting and figuring out what you like. I hope that this video has cleared up some questions you have about mid-side processing. If you have any more questions that I didn't go over in the video, please drop a comment, let me know, direct message me on Instagram. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Until then, keep making some cool mixes, subscribe to the channel for more future videos, and I will catch you guys next time. Peace!